to my channel. In today's video, I thought it would be interesting to review Lorna Wing's original clinical account of Asperger syndrome. For those of you who don't know, Lorna Wing was a psychiatrist. She's dead now, but she was one of the first people to really draw attention to Asperger syndrome back in the end of the 1980s, beginning of the 1990s. I did actually once meet Lorna Wing. I had the pleasure of meeting her once when she opened, it was Sussex Autism Sussex, and she opened a resource centre, and I actually had the privilege of meeting her. And I actually had a conversation with her as well for about 15 minutes in the side room at the resource centre, and she was very interesting, and I talked to her about my life and stuff, and she was fascinated at what I had to tell her, and it was a very interesting experience. So she seemed very nice, but yeah, sadly she's dead now. But her original account, Asperger's a clinical account, which was written by Lorna Wing at the end of the 80s and the early 90s. I can't actually remember the exact time. Was it 1991? I think it's 1991. Anyway, I took some notes. The clinical account is quite long, so I only took notes on the bits that I thought were relevant, and I just thought it'd be interesting to kind of go over what she wrote and how it applies to my own sort of development, really. Bearing in mind this article was written way before the whole neurodiversity tripe came into the foreground, way before that privileged elitist Judy Singer had even coined the term neurodiversity. So in a way, it's sort of like a nostalgic era in a sense, before neurodiversity kind of changed the way we talk about autism. And if you ask me, the language was just so much better back then. So, and also this was at a time when Aspergers was still seen as a very serious disability, and the sort of psychification, that's a word, psychification, Melanie Sykes, of the condition had not yet happened. So some of the sort of interesting things she talks about in terms of early development, as she mentions that there may be a difficulty in using pronouns correctly with a substitution of second or third for the first person form. I thought that was an interesting point, because I had problems with pronoun reversal as a young child, where I would be a lot of the time, certainly up until about the age of 4 or 5, I would be using my name, Anna, instead of I. So I'll say Anna wants instead of I want. I would use the word she for myself instead of I, and my mum noticed this, obviously, and she found it rather, the word she used was it was irritating, but she didn't know why. But obviously we know now that it is actually quite common for people with Asperger's and other types of autism to do this when young. Obviously, children without these conditions can do it as well, but the difference is that in autism and the pronoun reversal tends to go on a lot longer than you'd find in typical children, and is a lot more repetitive, if you like. So that was an interesting observation. She also says that it's common for words and phrases to be repeated over and over. Yes, now as a child I did do that a lot. I once stood outside a shop when I don't know how old I was, but I would have been fairly young, because I used to have an issue with my hair coming out, or I used to worry that hair was coming out of my ponytail. I had a particular preoccupation with hair being neat and tidy, and I used to stand outside and I'd go, my ponytail, but over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. So I did do things like that a lot when little, like constantly repeating things. She also interestingly says that people with the syndrome may invent some words. Yes, I used to do that a lot as a kid. One invented word or phrase, I guess you could say idiosyncratic meaning. I'm sure like children do this as well. I don't think it's limited to autistic kids, but it is interesting that it is mentioned as something that could happen. One thing I used to do was I used to eat every Sunday we had rye bread, which I used to hate. Obviously I didn't really like rye bread, but every Sunday we had rye bread. I just wanted proper bread. I didn't like rye bread. I saw it as like a not very nice, healthy bread that I didn't like. So in order to kind of camouflage its taste, I used to slather it in a lot of butter and jam or honey, to disguise its taste, which I didn't like. Then obviously if you put loads of butter on something, it becomes greasy. So by implication, if the weather was greasy, like, you know, sort of like muggy or lots of flies, I'd call it a rye bready day. The problem was I used to forget or not realise that other people wouldn't understand the association. So when I would say to someone at school, it's a rye bready day today, they wouldn't understand and would give me a funny look, but I didn't realise that, you know, obviously they're not, you know, I didn't have that insight. But anyway, it's interesting that this is mentioned, that in autistic people tend to do this, or can do this a lot as kids. I guess the difference would be actually that a normal person may well do this as well, but they would understand that other people who aren't initiated into the meaning, they would understand that they would have to explain it to someone, whereas I didn't realise that. I guess that's the difference. Obviously, I would understand it now as an adult, but I didn't have that understanding as a kid. That involves sort of theory of mind, I guess, which I didn't have at all as a kid, really. So, yeah, it also says, go may invent some words, that's what I said. Subtle verbal jokes not understood, yep, definitely for me. And this is interesting. She refers to a young man with Asperger syndrome who observes that most of his contemporaries have girlfriends. He wishes this, but he has no idea how to indicate interest and attract a partner. Exactly. That's it. Obviously, I'm different because I'm a woman and I'm homosexual, but I have literally no idea. And you wouldn't know, but these days there are so many people like Sykes getting diagnosed that you wouldn't know that that's part of the problem. But yeah, as part of this original report as to what Asperger syndrome is, that's very interesting. This complete not knowing how to, like, because let's face it, if you find it hard to relate to people and make friends, how the hell are you going to know to, like, go the next level? People like Sykes make it look easy, but it's not. So yeah, what you find in the Asperger syndrome is that there can be some desire for this, but no idea in terms of how to, like, put it into place. Where someone with more classic autism tends not to have any desire at all, whereas a person with Asperger's might have a desire but not know how to do it. Excellent rote memory and intensely interested in one or two subjects. Yep, that's very relevant to me. Asperger describes, Hans Asperger describes, can't read my writing, how unsatisfactory Asperger syndrome describes how students will tend to follow their own interests regardless of instructions and activities of the rest of the class. Yeah, he describes them as unsatisfactory students because they follow their own interests regardless of instructions and activities of the rest of the class. That is extremely relevant to me as a kid. I used to just walk around a classroom, basically. I didn't do what I was told because I wasn't interested in it. I was often said to be daydreaming. A teacher said I had my head in the clouds. Didn't know what the hell she meant at that age, but, you know, I would just be, like, staring out of a window, basically, and kind of just daydreaming, because I was either daydreaming or being mildly disruptive, which is why my parents were often called into the classroom, because I was disrupting the class, walking around the classroom, not doing the work, unless, of course, it very much interested me, and then I'd be 100% engaged. Like when I was in year 6, we were studying ancient Greeks and the human body. Because I was so interested in the human body, I literally wrote down everything the teacher was saying, like, so intensely. I actually have a really strong memory of it. Like, literally, my notebook was full of notes because I was so extremely interested in the human body. But if it was something I wasn't interested in, I'd just be messing around, getting told off. I was often asked to leave the classroom in year 6 because I would, like, make funny faces, or I just prance around the classroom being really kind of, I don't know, silly. So that's very pertinent to me. Pathetic childishness. Yeah, very, very much so. Like, I think that's classic in Asperger's, though, isn't it? That we tend to be emotionally immature, developmentally. We stayed like kids for a lot longer, even in adulthood. I still don't feel like a proper adult. Basically, we are basically locked into a permanent kind of childishness, in a sense. Or you wouldn't know it from people like Melanie Sykes, but, you know, that's classic to, like, Asperger's, really. You know, we are basically, we don't really grow up, and that's part of the problem. That's why we face so many difficulties in adult life, because we're so behind in so many ways. Yeah, he also mentions, Lorna Wing also mentions motor issues, and I've already mentioned I had motor difficulties as a kid in certain areas, mainly the fine motor areas, both for me. And he says, She also says that it's possible to find people with all the features characteristic of Asperger's syndrome, other than those with a normal IQ. But she says that for these people, Asperger's hopeful view of prognosis has to be modified to take such cases into account. I would say I'd probably fall into that group. Although I have an extremely high verbal IQ, my non-verbal is really, really severely low. And obviously non-verbal is what matters when it comes to like being able to adult and live normally. So I guess, yeah, I would say my IQ is hardly exactly normal because it's so extreme in both directions. But yeah, she says that it's possible to find people with all the features characteristic of Asperger's syndrome other than those with a normal IQ. But Asperger's hopeful view of prognosis has to be modified to take such cases into account. I guess obviously it does make the issues more severe, obviously, if you do have that, if you do have, say, difficulties in certain areas of intellect, regardless of whether or not they're only, I mean in my case it's just in a non-verbal area, verbally I'm very strong. Interestingly, she also says that the syndrome shades into eccentric normality. I think that's important to note, because that shows how some of these people getting diagnosed, like Melanie Sykes, Christine McGuinness, it does make you wonder whether they're just eccentric normals, because how would you know when it shades into these type. So I'm going to move over to video number 2 now, just to carry on talking about Asperger's syndrome, a clinical account written in 1991 by Lorna Wing. So move go to video number 2 now.